Imagine this scenario. Kevin is driving his car carelessly through a crosswalk and accidentally breaks a pedestrian's leg. Meanwhile, Sachin is throwing a house party, playing excessively loud music late into the night, ignoring his neighbor's complaints. These scenarios immediately force us to determine specific liabilities, the necessary standards of proof, and which sources of law actually control the outcome. The state regulates unacceptable behavior through public law. If Kevin drives dangerously or Sachin violates a noise ordinance, the community as a whole steps in to prosecute them. But Kevin also injured a specific pedestrian, and Sachin is disturbing specific neighbors. These individuals can take private action against them to resolve their personal disputes. English law draws from historical and modern sources that frequently govern the same event at the same time, often leading to direct conflict. To solve a legal problem, you must identify the specific source and jurisdiction that applies to a fact pattern. This diagnosis determines the outcome of any case. Let's isolate Kevin's car crash and look at the civil track first. Beth, the injured pedestrian, brings a civil tort claim against Kevin. Her objective is compensatory. She is seeking financial damages to cover the cost of her broken leg. To win, Beth only needs to prove her case on the balance of probabilities. She must show it is more likely than not that Kevin was at fault. If the Crown takes Kevin to court for dangerous driving, the objective shifts from compensation to punishment. In 1935, the House of Lords heard the case of Wilmington versus DPP to clarify exactly who bears the burden of proof in these criminal trials. The court established the golden thread of English justice. The accused is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Because Kevin's freedom is at risk, the state faces a much higher hurdle. The prosecution must prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It is essential to distinguish these tracks. A civil court awards financial compensation to the victim, while a criminal court imposes penalties on behalf of the public. Now, consider Sachin's loud music, which has triggered a civil claim from his neighbors. If the neighbors rely strictly on common law, the court can order Sachin to pay them damages for the nuisance, but it cannot physically force him to turn off the music. This limitation traces back to a time when litigants had to purchase a specific writ from the King's Chancellor to start an action. If an appropriate writ did not exist, there was no procedure for enforcing a right. The common law became rigid, formal, and limited primarily to financial compensation. This diagram outlines the historical solution: equity. Frustrated litigants began petitioning the king directly for fairness, leading to the creation of the Court of Chancery. This body developed flexible rules to supplement and prevail over rigid common law rights. Through equity, the court can issue the exact remedy Sachin's neighbors need, an injunction, which is a direct order compelling him to stop the noise. As these two systems operated side by side, conflicts arose. In 1615, the Earl of Oxford's case asked the king to decide what happens when an equitable decision directly contradicts a common law judgment. The ruling established a firm hierarchy. In any conflict, equity always prevails over the common law. Today, the administration of these systems is fused. Under the Supreme Court of Judiciary Acts, a single judge can award Beth common law damages and grant Sachin's neighbors an equitable injunction simultaneously. However, while common law damages are an automatic right, an equitable remedy remains a discretionary privilege. The court will only grant an injunction if you come to equity with clean hands. For a long time, the strict declaratory theory argued that judges merely find and declare existing law, rather than create it. Modern cases like Kleinwort-Benson and the Ree A. Children case, which involved the surgical separation of conjoined twins, clarified that judges do have a lawmaking role. When facing a situation with no existing precedent, senior judges actively create new common law, but they remain subservient to a higher authority. That authority sits in Parliament, the supreme lawmaking body in the country. Under the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, Parliament has the freedom to make or unmake any law. No UK court has the power to strike an act of Parliament. Looking at this chart, we divide legislation into primary acts of Parliament and secondary legislation, like local bylaws used to fine Sachin. Within public statutes, Parliament uses codifying legislation to compile scattered case law, or consolidating legislation to tidy up existing statutes. Because Parliament is sovereign, passing a single new act instantaneously overwrites any conflicting rules established by centuries of common law or equity. This strict sovereignty faced a major complication in 1973 when the UK joined the European Economic Community. The tension peaked during the fact-retame litigation. Parliament had passed the Merchant Shipping Act 1988 to prevent Spanish fishermen from exploiting UK fishing quotas. The Spanish fishermen successfully argued the act violated European treaties. The European Court of Justice ruled that UK domestic courts had to disapply the Act of Parliament because it conflicted with directly effective EU law. Following the UK's exit from the European Union, the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018 altered this relationship. The 2018 Act ensured that thousands of regulations remained in effect after the transition period, preventing the sudden collapse of the UK's existing regulatory framework. There is also a second supranational layer, the European Convention on Human Rights, which was incorporated into domestic law by the Human Rights Act 1998. This allows judges to issue a formal Declaration of Incompatibility, a mechanism that requires Parliament to review why a piece of primary legislation contradicts convention rights. While Parliament has reclaimed ultimate sovereignty, assimilated law and the Human Rights Act act as powerful active filters that must be applied to every legal problem. Returning to our opening scenarios, Kevin's collision and Sachin's late-night noise. Kevin faces a civil tort claim where liability is decided on the balance of probabilities and a parallel criminal prosecution requiring proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Sachin faces civil neighbors seeking a discretionary equitable injunction alongside potential criminal fines for violating a statutory bylaw. This graphic maps out the entire hierarchy for your mental model. When these sources collide, apply the diagnostic algorithm. Equity overrides the common law, statute overrides both, and assimilated law and human rights standards act as a persistent filter over statute. Navigating the English legal system relies on identifying how these different sources interact. Understanding these jurisdictional collisions is the final essential step in resolving any legal conflict.